All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Midnight Post podcast. So this is going to be a paranormal themed podcast. I used to do this in the past, and this is kind of, I guess, what you would call a reboot. Um, Today we're going to be talking about something in the paranormal field, um, as far as cryptozoology goes. And for anyone who doesn't know what cryptozoology is, it's basically the study of animals that may or may not exist. Anything that's basically not confirmed yet. So we're talking like Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, Chupacabra, which happens to be what we're going to be discussing today. And I actually brought on a special guest. We're going to be having Jason join us for this conversation. He is, um, fairly familiar with this topic, but also kind of gives a good perspective of, you know, kind of an outside of the field point of view. So he's going to be coming in kind of as our skeptic as well. So, Jason, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely, anytime.
So yeah, let's just jump right into it here. So Chupacabra literally translates to goat sucker, um, and the first sighting was in March of 1995, in Puerto Rico. And a little brief synopsis here is 8 sheep were discovered dead, each with 3 puncture wounds in the chest area, and reportedly completely drained of their blood. And then a few months later, in August, an eyewitness, Madeline Tolentino, reported seeing the creature in Puerto Rico, or the Puerto Rican town of Canovanas. I might be totally messing that up, but they had as many as 150 farm animals and pets that were reportedly killed. In 75, similar killings in the small town of Mocha were attributed to El Vampiro de Mocha, or the Vampire of Mocha. So clearly, this thing indicates that it has some sort of interest in blood. That's assuming all these reports are accurate and true. Um, I don't know. I mean, so Jason, what leaps out at you immediately when you hear about a number like 150 farm animals and pets were reportedly killed? I mean, that's hard to make that up, right? I mean, there has to be something to it.
Yeah, definitely the killings. That part isn't far fetched. You know, that part's believable. The only thing that sticks out for me though is what killed them, because one of the things, like you read from your synopsis, was that there was reported of 150 pets and animal killed. It doesn't say how they were killed. It doesn't even say that they reportedly had the same puncture wounds as what the original 8 did.
Yeah,
So, off the bat, right there, there's a line of skepticism just in the sheer fact that the reports at least don't seem to have the same problems that the originals did, meaning
yeah,
the puncture wounds.
yeah. And I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure if these 150 were all at the same time or this was spread out over a certain amount of time. I don't really have any details as far as that goes. Um,
Right.
but what does make me curious is the fact that they're reporting this. You know, the fact that it had the puncture wounds on the chest for the original 8 sheep, um,
Mm-hmm.
or the 150 farm animals dead. You would think that these farmers would be familiar with what might be killing their livestock, but if they're actually, going out and saying, "Hey, this isn't normal. This is something weird," that does kind of jump out to me a little bit as far as like, you know, because if you have farmers who have these animals, you would think they would be used to coyotes getting them or wolves or whatever, But
Right, it definitely does raise the suspicion of some sort of oddity going around. You know, what is it that's causing the puncture wounds? Because, like you said, they should be familiar with something that would typically attack their animals, whereas what happened seems to be an atypical situation. And what would do that?
yeah, and the other thing too is that would these people, the witnesses, would they have reason to make up something like this? I know that folklore is a very rich tradition, especially in
Mm-hmm.
Central America, the Native American people as well. I mean, there's stories dating back, of all kinds of supernatural things, um, and I think that if this is, I mean, I guess feeding on blood doesn't necessarily make it supernatural, but it does make it not normal because there aren't, enough nutrients in blood to probably sustain an entire population, I wouldn't imagine.
No, and there's actually very few known species of animals that do survive on blood. And even then, they survive on blood and a substitute.
Yeah.
So, in this aspect, something that's willing to drain an entire animal of blood and then repeat it, an additional 7 times. Um, if a normal species that we know of, such as like a human being, if we ingested that much blood, it would kill us. So clearly, it didn't kill this creature, and it kept going.
And so originally the chupacabra was known to be more humanoid, I guess, kind of bipedal, upright, kind of a scaly back or like with ridges on the back. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then over time, it kind of was changed into being described as more of a canine type creature. Still usually walking on the two legs, but occasionally four. A lot of like this is how like I'm sure a lot of the listeners and viewers have seen news reports where they claim to have captured a chupacabra or they have one in a cage, and 9 times out of 10, well, I mean, I guess you could say 10 times out of 10 so far, it's usually a mangy dog or a mangy fox or something that's malnourished.
Yeah, and some of the things I looked up was that every reported capture of the quote chupacabra um, had been determined to be, like you said, some form of canine that was infested or infected with some form of disease, causing it to be hairless, causing it to act abnormally, attack things, and so forth.
Yeah. And in the majority of cases, I mean, the eyewitnesses do describe more of a supernatural being as far as like 4.5 to 5.5 feet tall, oval
Mm-hmm.
shaped head bearing alien like eyes that glow red. That's another trend that you see in cryptozoology a lot of times, or on the far end of things is the glowing red eyes. I don't know what it is about humans, but we seem to, you know, associate that kind of fear with anything that has glowing red eyes. Whether it be like dogs or canines in the night, whether it be Bigfoot, whether it be the dog man, of Michigan. It could be anything. But
Yeah, we're naturally skeptical of something that even if you just bring out the eyes, if you were to see two eyes in the night, but you couldn't depict what that entity is, you're naturally going to be skeptical. What is that? You're nervous. But then you throw in an additional color or an abnormal color such as red, it's really going to put people on edge.
yeah, yeah, and usually too, it even comes with a smell. And
Mm-hmm.
they actually say it's a sulfur type of odor,
Mm-hmm.
strong and unpleasant. So, ironically, what do we associate sulfur with would be demons. So, I think, especially, not just like stereotype Central America, but they do have a rich culture, as I said, of, that sort of demonic or spiritual landscape, like so if they did see something that has glowing red eyes, 4.5 to 5.5 feet tall, alien type head, they would most likely leap to it being demonic. And so
Mm-hmm.
if they said it had a sulfur type odor, that kind of spices it up a little bit. So um,
Yeah, it does add an extra flair to it, I guess you could say.
and that's one of the things that makes me think that this could be something that's been, maybe they saw something weird and they just decided, well, we're going to make this a little bit more exciting than it is because that maybe they didn't have a lot going on at the time, or maybe they, it's fun to tell stories. I mean, that's why we're talking about this right now, and so I wouldn't be that surprised if it was something made up, but that doesn't change the fact that we have these dead animals and something killed them.
Right, and abnormally killed them at that.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. There's the chance that there was just stories passed down of, so to say, a chupacabra or something in similar appearance. And it so happens that the sightings, that's what their brain registered. That's what their brain initially jumped to when they saw an unidentified creature. Their brain jumped to that, and they started to piece the puzzle together, if you will.
Yeah, and
But then, like you said, though, the puncture wounds, the abnormal killings, we need
yeah,
we need something to explain that as our own nature.
yeah, and if you think about like audio, so our brain does this thing where it if it hears a noise that it doesn't recognize, it'll try and fill in the gaps. So that's why I forget the word for it, but that's why you can hear sounds and it sounds like voices or something like that. Our brain naturally tries to make sense of it. So
Yes.
I could imagine it being a similar case with their eyes, their eyesight, seeing something in the dark. Maybe they just kind of filled in what they thought it was, and that could
Right.
also
Because
lead toward something odd.
yeah, because I mean, if you saw, let's say it was dark out and the shadows played tricks on you. I mean, how many times have we all been told, the darkness or the shadows are just playing tricks on you? Whatever
Yeah,
you think is there is actually not there. So,
yeah, and I mean, so we're kind of going over this with on one hand, it could all be made up on purpose, to make a story, or it could be a misidentification. It could be, I mean, like I said, with the people who lost their animals, that's an expensive hoax. Like that's not something that they're going to go out and murder their animals for fun just to make a good story. So something obviously happened with these things, and going back to that too, it's not just in Puerto Rico. They've had
mm-mm.
witnesses in Brazil, Chile, Mexico, even in the United States and Texas. That's where a lot of people claim to have captured them. And most
Mm-hmm.
recently, they had a sighting or alleged sighting in 2018 in India. But I think the local authorities there determined that wasn't actually what it was. It was just a mangy dog or something. But it was killing chickens. So, and then even in July of 2019 in Pakistan, they had sightings. So it definitely gets around, and if it does, it does tend to show up in these desert type areas. So I mean, let's assume this is a real thing. Like clearly it likes a certain type of landscape. You don't hear about it showing up in the rainforest. You don't hear about. I mean, that's not totally fair because we haven't explored so much of the rainforest. But you don't see it showing up in Oregon. For example, there could be cases there, unsubstantiated, but it does seem to be in one general type of area, which is kind of curious.
It is, and that could be posed to urban legend. You know, because it originated in Puerto Rico and under the environment that they were in, it's been associated to that.
Do you
As Go ahead.
do you think that because of it being a desert type region or a drier climate, do you think that the animals there, the dogs, the foxes, whatever they may be, do you think they're more inclined to be malnourished or have scabies or something like that? Do you think that that type of region lends to that?
I think like the scabies and the disease part, maybe a little bit, because when you are in an environment that's harsh, whether that be rainforest, whether that be desert, Arctics, it doesn't matter. At some point, you're going to run into a situation where nutrition is in short supply. So you take what you can get. Um, it We're preached to, don't drink out of any water source you see because it could be contaminated. So in a similar situation, if you're in a desert, whether you're an animal or a human, and you need water, you're going to go to the nearest source and you're going to take the risk and you're going to drink it. Now, I'm not saying that's how you get scabies or anything like that, but I think you are at a higher risk of taking a risk, whether you're an animal, a human, a dog, anything. You pose that risk because you need to survive.
Yeah, and it also happens to be some of these might be poorer areas. Like they don't have a substantial amount of resources all around. I mean, it's kind of lending to what you're saying. I mean, these aren't particularly wealthy areas necessarily. They're kind of strapped for resources, strapped for food in particular. So that would reach out, or that would kind of inform us to where it's going after these chickens and things like that. But again, like I would need to see on these animals that have been attacked if there are the consistent punctures in the neck, if we have consistency between all of these, or if it's just somebody being like, oh, I think it was this, and then everyone's like, oh, clearly it was.
Right. That falls back on the validity of the the person reporting or the person giving the information, the person that claims. You know, One thing I read though was, and you kind of touched on this, was back in '75, there was reports of a similar situation, but it was deemed that it was due to a satanic cult. Um, you mentioned earlier too how the red eyes and that is associated with demonic something or another, demonic beings. So it to me, I don't feel like it's a large leap to go from, a satanic cult to the idea of a satanic being, like the Chupacabra could be interpreted as with the red eyes. Is it possible that there was just another situation of, so to say, a satanic cult?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if they were trying to, redirect the light, so to speak, like get the heat off them and blame it on something else, that would be another option. And kind of going down that road, I mean, they've even had a lot of. So, I mean, Central America is known for having a lot of UFO sightings, a lot of UFO activity, and
Mm-hmm.
there have been some that have purportedly claimed that these chupacabra are actually alien pets, like they were left here by the aliens, and so they're just kind of running rampant around.
Right. And I will play devil's advocate on that. That let's just for a second say that they are that, because we don't know for sure. It would explain how this creature can be spotted, as far away as India versus where it originated, Puerto Rico. How
Yeah,
how did this creature travel such distance?
yeah.
Or if it was in India the entire time, what kept it at bay from being sighted, from it exposing itself?
Yeah, and if it did exist too as well, like it would have to have some sort of intelligence to stay hidden for this long. I mean, a lot of times, you think of the Bigfoot sightings and things like that. Like this is a bipedal ape, or maybe not an ape, some sort of bipedal creature with
Mm-hmm.
some sort of intelligence. Like it knows, that it knows what video cameras are essentially, or it would at least seem to be. And so to maintain that level of secrecy or hiddenness, if that's a word, um, it would need to know to avoid people. And so I think, though, that's not to say like the chupacabra, in relatively speaking, it's a newer crypto or cryptid. Its first sighting was in '95, so
Right.
it's not like going back years and years. So that's what also makes it kind of interesting. It's like it just dropped in, out of nowhere. It just was here. So that could be too if it was an alien pet. Aliens just decided to drop it down here one day. It could be. Well, I mean that's kind of going down the rabbit hole, right? But I mean, there could be multiple species of alien visiting the planet, and maybe one species came along and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna drop this off here and see what happens," or whatever.
Right, but that, like you said, you kind of touched on going down the rabbit hole, but we have to be open-minded. One of the things with cryptozoology is it's not confirmed, but it's also not proven to not exist. So while some things may seem far-fetched, you can't completely shut any one thing out. Could it have been aliens? Yeah, aliens have been sighted in extremely far back into the human history. Um, so let's say that the aliens are true and we don't go too deep into the rabbit hole. How far fetched is it to believe that they left some creature behind? To me, it's not that far fetched to make that connection. Now, the problem I have with the chupacabra being a pet of an alien is the alterations in stories, folklore, and sightings. That's the part where it gets kind of hard to comprehend and believe.
Yeah,
The fact that the story changes throughout time. Where do these changes come from, and what happened to the original story? Why is that no longer believed or no longer in circulation, I guess, if you will?
yeah. Why did it go from a bipedal reptilian type creature to a canine, basically?
Right. And, I understand the canine situation, or at least some of the canine situations where it happened to be a different creature, just one that we know of, and we were able to capture and we were able to identify why that creature did not appear to be a normal canine. It had some sort of disease. But then it it doesn't die off. The story kind of spirals even more. We went from the bipedal tall creature, 4.5, 5 feet tall. Then we went to the canines, and then further reports actually don't mention anything of it being exceptionally tall for a creature.
Yeah.
It doesn't mention some of these other kind of key aspects. So it kind of makes it hard to understand if these sightings were the same thing, or if because the Chupacabra is so new in the crypto history that it's still kind of in the back of people's minds, but a little bit more fresh than something along the lines of Sasquatch or Loch Ness Monster or mermaids. So did they associate the two together because it's not that far back in history?
Yeah, and I mean, you know, like you said, it's kind of just all over the place. But so in closing, let's kind of summarize what we've got here. I mean, we've got, and this is actually, I mean, though it is kind of all over the place, it's still one of my favorite cryptids. I mean, it's an interesting thing in general. But so it's all over the place in that, well, for one, it's well traveled. It's all over the globe to an extent. It
Or
it's
at least it seems to be making its way.
Yeah, yeah. Whether that's migration or it just happens to show up and nobody had seen it prior to that, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got it's all over the place. It's widely described different features. Apparently the killings have not always had those three puncture wounds or two puncture wounds. It's hard to nail down the validity of the witnesses, the credibility of the witnesses as well. Um, that's not to say there aren't any credible witnesses. I know I've read from police officers who claim to have seen this thing, and they have reputations to uphold. So, I mean, some people are willing to speak out about this, and they really did see something, or they truly believe that they saw something. It's just really hard to nail down because it is so spread out. Like it's everywhere, but it's nowhere at the same time. So, I don't know. It's just really fascinating, and I wanted to cover it for one of our episodes. So, this is kind of our leaping off point. I really love cryptozoology in general. We're going to do an episode on Bigfoot. I want to do one on the little people of Ireland because it's surprising. I believe the last statistic I read was like 60% of the population of Ireland believes in little people, believes in not necessarily leprechauns, but like fairies. And, they actually have nationwide, like mandated laws where they're building a road and they actually move the road to go around these habitats where they think that these things live. So that's another really fascinating one. Icelandic elves, I love that kind of stuff too. So, and we're definitely gonna have Jason back on as well to kind of go over some of those and give a alternative, point of view. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I feel like we didn't really like nail anything down in the Chupacabra case, but it's almost impossible to do so because we don't have enough information. We have too many varying reports. Um,
But it opens up the topic for the cryptozoology. It's a good one that there's enough evidence that there's possibly creatures out there, but also enough evidence to suspect falsehood.
yeah,
It's a good door opener.
yeah, and there is deception too. I mean, there is a darker side to this. Somebody could be making up the story. There actually were people who, down in the southern parts of the U.S., who were purposely inbreeding canines to get these weird-looking dogs and capture them and claim that they had found the chupacabra or captured the chupacabra. So, that's. I mean, if you want to say a darker side, that would be it. It's really hard to nail down, but I think it is a good introduction and it's a good jumping off point, if nothing else. So hopefully we'll get
Right.
some sort of evidence. I mean, as time goes by and as we, get better and better cameras, and there's more trail cameras out there, and there's more like security footage. I mean, I don't see why farmers wouldn't have security cameras on their chicken coops. I mean, why not?
Yeah, with the resources at arm's disposable is it's not hard to get cameras. It's not hard to get some of these pieces of equipment that will help us, even if it's not necessarily Chupacabra, but start discovering things that aren't as well known.
Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of look forward to the future in that aspect. Even if it does get rid of some of the mystery in the world, I think it'll be interesting to see what is out there and what isn't. And, like Jason and I have talked privately, you can't prove a negative. You can't prove that something doesn't exist, but you can definitely make it less likely. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so it's fun. It's fun to look at and fun to research. And yeah, we're gonna do it again. So again, thanks Jason for coming on. And
Absolutely.
yeah, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening.